Well, hello and welcome to Uncorking a Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I'm pleased to introduce you to Rob Volpe. Rob is an astute observer of life and a master storyteller who brings empathy and compassion to the human experience. As CEO of Ignite 360, he leads a team of insight, strategy, and creative professionals, helping the world's leading brands across a range of industries to help release untapped potential. As a thought leader in the role of empathy in marketing and the workplace, Rob frequently speaks on the topic at conferences, corporations, and college classes, and he has been quoted in Advertising Week, Mashable, Huffington Post, TheStreet.com, Gourmet Retailer. I got to ask you about that, and the Chicago Tribune, among others. Rob's first book, Tell Me More About That, can be purchased wherever books are sold. Here today to talk about that book and so much more is Rob Volpe. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Rob.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming. So I'm going to ask you the first question, which is what I ask everybody, and that is, Rob, where does your story begin?
That's such an awesome question. My story as it relates to empathy in particular goes back to a fall day in, I think it was 1980 in Greenfield, Indiana, which is a small town that I grew up in. And my family had just moved into that small town. And it's where my classmates decided to start to tease me and announce that I was gay, even though it was fifth grade. It was 1980. I didn't know what gay was. You know, it's not like it is today with gender awareness and fluidity and all the things. And that's where I guess the troubles started for me. And it's where I started to really leverage empathy and not consciously, but I was trying to be empathetic with people in order to navigate and survive a painful childhood.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where a heightened sense of empathy skills came about for me. So I would say that was definitely where this particular story starts.
Got it. So kind of early childhood experience, not a positive one at that. But sometimes those kind of early painful experiences lead us to I don't know, sometimes insight, but also to kind of go on and do some really interesting things kind of later in life.
Well, yeah, it was, sometimes I describe it as like if I were Peter Parker, it was that spider bite in my origin story, that painful thing that happened that ultimately unlocked a gift that I'm now, my career is all about empathy and being more empathetic, and the field that I've fallen into, as well as then understanding how to be empathetic and being able to identify that, distill it down into a way that people can connect to it and hopefully be more empathetic themselves, because we got an empathy crisis on our hands.
Tell me more. Well, tell me more about that. How's that for a reference to your book? But what do you mean when you say empathy crisis? What do you mean?
You don't have to look far to see it, but even sort of empirically, I'm going to have every single cat that I own, and there are 3. I now have 2 of them circling around me. So sorry. You don't have to look far to see that there's an empathy crisis in terms of the way we're engaging with each other, communicating with each other. But the data is even there to prove that out. There was a study out of the University of Michigan that came out in 2010. They did a study of studies analyzing student life surveys from 1979 to 2009 across 76 different universities. And they found, wow, really, they found that there was a 40% decline in the ability to see the point of view of your classmates from the time the study started until 2001. And then it didn't rebound or anything since then. When I first heard that in 2010, I was really shocked. It was really concerning that this was an issue, and thinking like, okay, in 2010, somebody who was in college at the turn of that century in 2001, they're in their 30s, and then today they're in their 40s. They have a partner, a spouse. They're working well into their career. They're managing people. They're members of their community, society, and yet they have diminished empathy abilities. And so the way that would end up playing out with each other, we wouldn't be able to communicate as well, collaborate, persuade, all the things that we're seeing. All the things that we're seeing in society today, you started to see all of that play out there. And being in qualitative research, that's what we're all about, is making empathetic connections, and understanding human behavior and helping our clients connect with that. And you were seeing it in our work, the challenge that our clients were having. They were being really judgmental about people that were other from, who they are in their own existence. And if you can't understand other people, how in the world are you going to be able to, if you're a marketer, create better products and services, create a great, compelling advertising message? But even like, how are you going to be a good neighbor to someone, on a personal human level? How are you going to be a good manager to somebody? How are you going to show up in your community?
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's just this notion that people can't see another person's point of view, or kind of refuse to. And there's no better evidence for that than going on Twitter, or any kind of social media thing where, somebody posts something and then immediately it's, well, you're wrong and here's why. And then it's name calling and it's trolling, and it's like, that's why I consider like Twitter to be like a cesspool. And I get mad at myself every time I go on it and go down these like little rabbit holes. But
it's like you got to be ready for a cage match these days,
right?
Instead of having just a normal conversation and trying to understand someone else's point of view.
Right. And and I think a lot of it, you say 2001 is kind of leveled off and never changed or never came back. This is the digital age. I mean, that's what's, that's kind of staring me in the face anyway. I would call them keyboard warriors, behind a screen, I don't think people would say half of the stuff they say online to another person face to face, but
face to face, or if they weren't hidden by the anonymity of their username and the fact they don't need to show their photo, show their face.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, a username like, corkboard 7324. You have no idea that's a real person or not. Hey, I'm just spitballing here. So before we get to the books, I do want to talk about it. I do want to talk about your career in qualitative research because, I share that in common. It's not really a career that anyone goes to college for. I know people who go and study business and they study law and they study, whatever, but I don't know too many moderators who, which is what we call ourselves from time to time, who kind of go to a university and say, you know what I want to do with my life? I want to run focus groups and interviews. How did you fall into the industry?
Well, and it's exactly that. How did you fall into it? And yes, every moderator I know fell into it. I got laid off from a job. I've been in marketing services most of my career, so 26 years, we'll call it right now. And because I was always fascinated with human behavior and understanding what makes people tick and how to influence behavior. And, it doesn't take a psychiatry degree or being a rocket scientist to draw the line back to what happened on that fall day in 5th grade and how did that impact everything that's been in Rob's life. And so I got into marketing, and I've been in marketing services all of that time, and I've journeyed through. I did PR, I did promotional marketing, grassroots marketing, you name it, I kind of did it. And they were all fun and interesting. But the thing that I was always intrigued with and what I really got excited about were those opportunities when I got to engage with the consumer. So if I was doing, years ago, one of my early jobs, I was doing sampling events for Starbucks and Dryers/Edie's ice cream. They had launched a line of ice creams together, and Starbucks back in the day did no advertising. It was all word of mouth. So they wanted to go to all these street festivals and scoop ice cream. And I was working at the PR firm and they hired me. And for me, that's like my dream job, to travel the United States scooping ice cream for a summer when I was 27 years old. It was perfect. But what I really loved about it was that moment where I was sharing the ice cream with somebody and then I was hearing back from them their reaction to it. And that's what I was sharing back with the clients. And they even said, like, wow, you're like a researcher. This is like getting a research report in addition to delivering all these samples. And then, so, okay, fine. I did nothing with that. And then I worked at Kraft Foods for a time in Metro New York. And, I'd be the first person at the focus groups and the last one to leave. And I'd sit through the debrief where the, brand management team was in and out and, doing all these other things at the time. Still didn't understand that this was really, how to have that type of a career and what that career would really look like. And finally, I got laid off from a job. We were living here in San Francisco. I'd been doing some consulting with some of the youth, the research firms that work in the youth space, because I had been at a toy company, had gotten let go. And I was having dinner with Wynn Tyree of Smarty Pants.
Sure, yeah.
And she and her husband were out here on a project, and I'd been doing a little consulting work with them. She was like, I'm looking for somebody that's just like you, that has a strategic thinking and can write a good deck, but that can also moderate. And we played the name game for a little while, couldn't come up with anybody. And then 3 days later, I was I swim as a hobby and for exercise. I was at an outdoor swimming pool here in the Bay Area, staring up at the sunshine, doing the backstroke. And all of a sudden it hit me. It was like, well, wait a minute. I like talking to people. Maybe I should be that moderator person. And so I ended up to talk to a couple of friends in the business. You would be great. Go here. Went to Riva, got trained. And a month after I got trained, I was standing in a Walmart in Allentown, Pennsylvania, patiently waiting for someone to engage with a Green Giant test product that we were studying. Wow. And I was hooked. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, no, it's there's it's funny. It's like one of these careers that I can never explain to my parents what I do for a living because they have no clue, and it kind of bothers me to this day that they can't really, because my twin brother's a lawyer, my other brother owns a wine store, my sister's a dental hygienist, I'm a moderator, but I get more enjoyment out of doing what I do than I think all three of them combined.
Well, if you write a book about, and that includes stories about what you do, it'll help them understand.
Well, that's probably a good segue to your book. So your book is Tell Me More About That. When did you have the notion to write a book, and it kind of just walk me through sort of the timeline and the process?
Sure. So written communication has always been one of my strengths and a favorite thing of mine. So I feel like I've always kind of had a book in me. I just didn't know what it was going to be about. And then I launched Ignite 360 and people started saying, oh, you're a CEO now, you need to write a book. And my response was, in what free time? Because, yeah, I'm a CEO, but I'm an entrepreneur and it's a startup and it's just go, go, go. But this book, the genesis of it really came about in 2016. So, as you'll recall, 2010, that study came out about empathy and the empathy crisis. When I started Ignite 360, we really started to pay attention to empathy, how to connect our clients, as I was mentioning, to their consumers. And we started to identify what we now call the 5 steps to empathy. So what are those barriers? What gets in your way, and how do you overcome those? And I was here actually in San Francisco speaking to a university class, talking about, okay, here's insights, awesome fields, don't wait till you're in your late 30s like I did to fall into it. Go now, find it. But then let me also talk about empathy and how important it is. And I used some of my stories from being in the field and times that I failed in being empathetic, to help illustrate the point of how empathy can help and make the world a better place and your job a better place. And there was just this moment where the students were listening to me, and I just had the voice inside me said, this is what you need to write about. You need to tell these stories. And that was when I realized, like, okay, this is what the book is going to be about, and it's going to be based on and using the stories of some of the amazing experiences that I've been fortunate to have as a researcher to help illustrate for others how to be empathetic and how to overcome those barriers for themselves, and to try to get there. So I started writing the book. That was in 2016. It's now 2022, so you can do the math. I am still running a company. So there were year-long gaps between writing. At times I did a lot initially just to get the stories out on paper, like what were those experiences going in home where I was particularly challenged or whatever was going on. And then I started thinking about the overlay of more empathy into it. Did a lot of writing in 2018. That's when I think the book really started to come about. And I set out, though, I didn't want to write a traditional business book. I wanted to write something that people would really want to read and get enjoyment out of. So it wasn't just an intellectual pursuit, but it was something much deeper that would kind of make people laugh out loud, be mindful, thoughtful, hear the message, but be entertained at the same time. Because I feel like that's how we learn most effectively, is through story, rather than me, just kind of lecturing to somebody. So kept working on the book, kept layering in more and more of me. I think in the initial drafts, I suppose I was a character, but I wasn't. It was a little more like kind of narrating rather than being in it. And so in 2018 is when I sort of started to step in as more of a character, and then did nothing in 2019. In 2020, I was going to go off, and I find I need to isolate myself in order to get into the zone and really write. And I knew the book needed work. I had a first draft that's longer than, or it wasn't a first draft, it was the fourth draft of the book, but much longer than the final finished piece. And I knew I needed to go off and work on it. I'd gotten some feedback on it. It was positive, but like every manuscript, it needed help. And I was going to go off and take a voyage on the Queen Mary 2 from Cape Town to Southampton. It was like 3 weeks at sea with only 3 stops. So I was going to have plenty of time to do nothing but write. And I thought that was going to be perfect. And then COVID happened. So that trip got canceled. And also in 2022, the world went to hell in a handbasket between George Floyd's murder and all the social injustice protests that came up, the elections, the pandemic, you name it. And that's when I was like, all right, I've got to do something with this book and to really bring it forward. So that's when I engaged my publisher in fall 2020. We spent all of last year working on the manuscript, and then the editing process, the cover, and all of that. And now here we are.
And here we are talking about it. So you mentioned
here it is. Yay!
Love the cover. Love the
Thank
cover.
you.
Just pops. Good packaging.
Thank you. I did a lot of research on the cover.
You mentioned your publisher. How did you find your publisher? Did you go the traditional, get a literary agent sells it to the publisher route, or how did you find your publisher?
Great question. So I knew there were 3 routes to publishing. There was the self-publish, upload your file onto Amazon or some other service, and you've got a book. Obviously the traditional route with traditional publishers, and then the sort of hybrid model. And I knew when I first heard about those 3 routes, I knew, like, my ego, of course, would be like, yeah, it'd be great to have Simon & Schuster want my book and do all the things. But the thing that stuck with me when somebody in publishing explained the situation, and they said, look, if you do the traditional route, which is really great and awesome, if you are at their mercy, though, like if they get the hot new, they get Barack Obama's book, they're going to put all their resources there. Your title is
you're getting bumped.
You're getting bumped.
Yeah.
And to me, the book was too important. The message was too important. I wasn't putting all this effort into it just to get bumped. So I wanted a bit more control in the process. So the hybrid model started to look really good. However, what I was finding in the research I had done and friends that had gone that route was the thing that was lacking in the hybrid model was sales and distribution. And I was like, but that's like cutting a tree in the forest and nobody can hear it. It's like, okay, great. I'm going to print and make this book. And then I'm supposed to go and sell every copy of it. Like, how does that work? I don't know books. I want Barnes and Barnes and Noble is carrying my book. Like, that's what I wanted. I wanted Books A Million to have it, indie bookstores. So So I got turned on. Dov Baron, who's a leadership a guru expert based out of Canada. I was having a conversation with him, and he connected me with Page Two, which is a hybrid publisher based out of Vancouver. And he said, he's like, Seth Godin has credited Page Two as like having cracked the code of how to do hybrid publishing. And I think that it's true. So I engaged Page Two, and that's great. I had all the editorial and the design support, but they also have a sales and marketing team, and they have a distribution agreement with Macmillan. So we've got like real legitimacy behind the book and getting the book out. And, like with any hybrid, like you could do as much or as little as you wanted. And I'm like, let's make the investment. Let's get the book out there. Because I want people to be able to stumble across the book.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah. Do you what did you learn about yourself during that process of writing and then ultimately publishing the book?
Wow. That being able to do it, I think is a big thing, just accomplishing that and getting it to the finish line. I think the other thing, the last 6 months before publication were so I'll give you the story. I was editing, we were editing one of the final chapters. We were in the proofing process, and I was like totally having a freak out about something. And my husband turned to me and he's like, who are you? I'm the one that's supposed to be the anxious one in the relationship. Like, what's happened here? We're like totally role reversed. And that I've learned more about just myself. I mean, I'm so reflective in the course of the book and really digging into the things that bothered me or where my judgment comes from, challenges that I've faced in the industry, in the research industry, in terms of interviewing people. So I've learned about that. I've learned about my own, perfectionism and like letting things go, and when to let things go, but when to also, express your voice and your view and make sure your vision is coming through. And yeah, like I didn't realize I was capable of so much neuroses and anxiety. And I mean, it's like any author that you've seen, in a movie, like I was that person. That's just Woody Allen neuroses.
I was thinking Woody Allen in my head when you said that.
Oh my God.
My God, what am I going to do?
Are they going to, I don't have children. So is that question, like, are people going to like the book? Are they going to enjoy it? And are they going to experience the book the way I intended as I was setting out? And I did a pre-launch reading about 3 weeks before the book came out. Had about 75 friends, families, clients, people that have just been supportive all along. And so this was my very first public reading of the book. And it was all on Zoom because, that's the times we're living in. But to see people laugh at the points that were supposed to be funny, to hear them and see them in the chat respond to the empathetic reflections, which I put in the back of every chapter. So, you hear a story, and then there are reflections to guide you back to thinking about how this plays out in your own life. And that's where the real sort of empathy building can come in, and the skill building comes in. But they responded really positively to that. They laughed in all the right places. They were moved in the right places. And then the one chapter I read has some, it's not scary, but there was definitely some suspense, and I left them hanging on like what happens next. And people were like, I want to know. And that was so reassuring and affirming that, like, okay, I've achieved what I set out to do.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was talking to somebody who writes, she won a Pulitzer Prize in biography years ago. And she was telling me, the first the first draft of her manuscript. She sent the first 3 chapters to her editor, and her editor canceled her contract right away because
Oh,
she's
God.
like, her quote, direct quote was, "It became increasingly evident to me that I had no idea what I was doing." So she actually said she's still hell bent on writing this biography. But she goes and she says, "Hey, what do I want readers to do? I want readers to, be held in suspense. I want them to turn the page." So she actually went and learned how to write thriller, mysteries and thrillers, and then took those lessons and applied them to the biography. She wins a Pulitzer Prize for it. So I love how you put suspense in your, you kind of use that as well. It's a very smart decision, Rob.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted, like I said, I always wanted people to be entertained. So I tried to craft the stories to be as engaging and entertaining and reflective as possible. And people have told me like they've laughed out loud in different parts. And it's a book about empathy,
Yeah.
but and I think what it is for me personally, I will still to this day, I have read Me Talk Pretty One Day by David Sedaris, and that particular essay, I've read that so many different times. There is still one part in it where I will laugh out loud to the point like I can't catch my breath because it just strikes me as so funny and absurd. And I wanted that. I wanted to be able to make people laugh through reading because I think reading is so quiet and solitary, but if you suddenly get a chuckle out of somebody or a laugh, you're like, okay, what's that about? What's going on that it's evoked this audible response?
Right. Well, I had an editor tell me once, "Funny is money," and I never forgot that. um yeah, I'm not going to ask you for your favorite story in the book because that's probably A, too hard, B, it's like picking one of your favorite children. But do you have one story that stands out to you that that you could share with us?
Well, yeah, it is a good question. There are so many. I am really fond of the chapter called Mirror Mirror. It's chapter 11, and it appears in the active listening section, and it's about paying attention,
Mhm.
and it's about being present in the moment. And the story behind it, we were on an in-home in suburban Philadelphia. This was, God, 2008, I think, and our clients wanted to learn more about aging boomers. And so we're in the home of this one respondent, and we were doing these 4-hour, pseudo day in the life type things. So like you're going really deep and you're like looking in every single cabinet and room and touring everything. And we'd already done the house tour. We'd been in, the bedroom, the bathroom, the basement, outside. We're back in the living room, about halfway done. We're taking a break for a moment. And I had 2 female clients and a female videographer with me. And then it was a female respondent. And the 2 clients go to the bathroom individually to do their business. And then they come back. And then I can't remember if Natalie, the videographer, went or not, but then I went. And it's important, the gender and everything is all important to the story. So I walk into the bathroom and okay, we're on a break, but I go in and I start to do my business and I have to pee. So being a man, I pee and choose to pee standing up in this situation. And so I lift the toilet seat and I start doing my thing. And I'd been holding water for a little while, so it took me a moment. And I look up and I see my reflection in some sort of form of a mirror. And I'm like, oh, this is unusual. What is this mirror? Because it's kind of like rounded. There's this like diagonal line through it, but I'm not really clear on what it is. And I widen my field of vision and realize that what I am staring at is actually, it's a stained glass, but then there's a mirror shape inside of it of an erect male penis and testicles. And it's like, oh, hello, what's this? And and I mean, we've been in her name's Amelia in the book. We've been in Amelia's house for hours. And we had been in the bathroom and nobody noticed it because of the way the toilet was situated kind of at the end of the tub and the shower curtain. You didn't see it, but the clients went in and used the toilet and they didn't see it and they didn't say anything. And so I came back out and I asked her, I was like, Amelia, I was just in the bathroom and I couldn't help but notice. And she bursts out laughing. And she had just so much joie de vivre and her presence and her spirit. She was amazing, like one of my all-time favorite respondents. And she goes, and the clients are like, what? And so I send them in to look, and they just start dying laughing. And we like come back together after a few minutes. And Amelia tells us this story about, she was at the time, mid-50s, Black woman, had divorced. And she said she had that custom made at an art fair. She saw there was a stained glass artist that was working. She asked if he did custom work. He said yes. And so she sketched out what she wanted. And she said she commissioned the work because she had seen too many of her friends change themselves for that. And she didn't want that to be her reason for being. So she has that, and she can look at that anytime that she wants to. And she's like, I wake up in the morning, I go into the bathroom, and there it is. And I just can see it. I don't have to change who I am for that. And, so just what an amazing statement of empowerment and an anthem of self, and just absolutely loved it. And it was all because I was paying attention. Even though I was in a break, I was still present and aware of my surroundings, and I just widened my field of vision. And I saw something that really, I don't want to say that it defined who she was, but it gave us so much added dimensionality to her character and her personality. And we just loved her. We were loving her already, but we loved her even more after that. So that is one of the stories in the book.
I'm not the world's biggest Grateful Dead fan by a long shot, but Jerry Garcia's got a great line in Scarlet Begonias that I cite often, which is, once in a while you get shown the light in the strangest places if you look at it right. And that's just all about following your curiosity and just, having the, almost the courage. Number one, you have the perception to see something that no one else saw, but then you had the sort of the courage to ask a question about it. And you got some unique insight that you probably wouldn't have had, otherwise.
We had talked about her relationship history by that point. And, she told us about being divorced and had an adult son and a grandson, but never got into that sort of aspect of who she was. So, yeah. And I love that Jerry Garcia quote. I'd not heard that one before.
No, yeah. That's Scarlet Begonias. Have a listen. Again, I'm not the biggest fan, but I have to cite that when I can. So I do have some specific questions here for you that I try to ask all of my guests to see if I see any patterns, but also to have a little fun. I'm going to start off with something that sometimes easy, sometimes difficult for people. But Rob, what were some of your favorite TV shows when you were a kid?
Charlie's Angels, Wonder Woman, and The Bionic Woman.
Okay. And you didn't know you were gay in 5th grade?
I knew there was something different about me.
I didn't mean that to come out the way it sounded. But.
Yeah. Well, Mike, you could have put a little more sarcasm into that. And hello. And I write about in the book, before we moved into that small town that I mentioned, we lived in another town. My dad's side of the family is from New York. My mom's side of the family is from South Carolina. We'd been living in New York, moved to Indiana for my dad's job. And there was my friend Joey, who lived down the street, and unbeknownst to us at the time, we're both gay, but totally hit it off. And we would role play Wonder Woman and Bionic Woman, and, while the other kids were playing, Dukes of Hazzard or Adam 12 or whatever, we were spinning around into our costumes to go fight crime. Yeah. And
with the bracelets,
bullets and bracelets.
And Jamie Summers could squeeze a tennis ball and have it break.
Absolutely.
In her hand. Absolutely. I'm there with you. I mean, I love
a very appropriate, like, pull the hair back behind her ear so she could use her bionic hearing.
That's right. That's right. Well, I mean, I'll see you, playing those things. I played Love Boat when I was a kid, and which my listeners know because Love Boat has come up quite a bit on this show.
Love Boat
Like,
was an awesome show. I loved Love Boat.
and I tell you what, I started rewatching it during the pandemic, from season one, and that Dr. Adam Bricker, he's me too to a few women on that show.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
It's
gosh.
not,
There's so many things that are bad. That's funny because during the early days of the pandemic, I went back and started watching Charlie's Angels just for like some comfort. Like, and I still find like, because the world is so crazy right now, it's like, what's the comfort TV from our youth that we can go back to just to feel like things are okay again?
Absolutely. I mean, any of those. I started watching Emergency again, which was when I was a kid. That was my all-time favorite show. The paramedics and the fire. It was.
There were I vaguely recall some dreamy paramedics on that show.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. All right. So we got your TV shows. How about this? What artists would we find on one of your favorite playlists?
Oh, Kate Bush.
All right,
Kate Bush. First and foremost, Kate Bush, and then Culture Club, Duran Duran. But the other one that's really interesting, and when I've written about this on social media before, when I'm trying to get into the zone for writing, or I just need to like calm down, anything that's like that late 60s, early 70s Burt Bacharach sound. Totally does it to me. And it's funny, I've mentioned it to my parents and they laugh because that was the music that they were listening to back then. So I think I was born in 68, so in my early formative years and probably in the womb, like Dionne Warwick, Walk On By, all of that. Love it.
I love some good yacht rock. I'm not gonna lie. Give me some Christopher Cross. Sailing. Come on.
Take me away.
Yeah, all good.
Absolutely.
Getting more literary here. How do you feel when you're staring at a blank piece of paper and your job is to write something? So it's a blank piece of paper or computer screen, depending on how you write.
Is it for a client or for myself?
For yourself.
Invigorated when it's for myself.
Okay, tell me more. Why is it different from when you're writing for a client?
Because when it's for myself, it can go in so many different directions and ways, and it's imagination, I think, about to spill forth, and I can I don't want to say write in any way that I want to, but I can play with it, where I think there's a pressure deadline for clients and you're just like, what's the thing I'm trying to say? So I've found it harder to start writing something for clients than even when I'm writing like thought piece. I'm part of Entrepreneurs Leadership Network now, and so even when I'm writing thought pieces for them, those things are blog posts. Those flow so much more easily and get done so much faster than when I'm having to do something for a client.
Yeah, I mean, I will clean my desk, clean the house, take the dog for a walk. I don't know, take a ferry to Long Island before, writing the first sentence for a client report.
It's amazing. I go through, I don't know if you're this way, but it sounds like it, where it's like, I'm like, okay, I'll write I get through 3 bullet points and then I've got to go do something else. Like I check my email, I check social media, I go get something to eat, play with the cats, whatever. And then I come back to it. And so it takes forever. And I have some colleagues who just can like sit down and plow through it. But for some reason I have this, like, I can't, I don't know if it's a focus thing or there's something about the way my brain works and as I'm processing, but I need that sort of other thing to distract me.
Yeah, sure.
Whatever.
You're an author now, so I'm curious to know what lesson about being an author do you feel like you learned the hard way?
That I feel like I learned the hard way. That's a really good question. That it's just never done. Can I hold on? Can I show you?
Yeah, please.
The first draft isn't in here, but this is every other draft of the book. And I mean, going through the proofing, especially, just, move this paragraph here, there, everywhere, changes constantly. And it takes hours to do it. And then finally it was interesting that we did 3 rounds of proofing. So when the book was in layout and I was looking at the pages of it, we did 3 rounds. And the first 2 rounds, I made some pretty substantial edits to, moving paragraphs, changing sentences. The publishers, the page 2 was great. They were like, oh, you're easy. This is like nothing. I was like, okay, that's good. But then when we got to the 3rd round, I got the 3rd round right as my grandmother was passing away in South Carolina. And I had gone to be with my family for that transition. And so I didn't have the time and probably the emotional kind of focus for it. And it helped me just, as I'm letting go of my grandmother, just let it go. It's okay. Like you've done everything. Because I think a book writing, it's something you can just always tweak. So, and it's so easy now with technology and it's all digital. It's easy to get in there and edit around, but at some point you have to put your pencil down.
Yeah.
And just let it go. And so I think similar to, at that same time that I was letting my grandmother go, I was 97 years old. It's like, you can let this go. Just check and make sure those changes are there and don't stress about it.
Yeah, you're never going to have a perfect book. It's never going to be, no matter how many editors see it, no matter how many proofreaders look at it, it's never going to be perfect. But that's what 2nd and 3rd editions are for,
Well, and I took the time over the holidays. So I got, an early copy, one of the first printed copies of the book. So it came out in late February. I got it right before Christmas, and I spent time over the Christmas break reading the book like a reader. And that was also hard, like not to look at it so critically, but just to enjoy it the way I intended my readers to enjoy it. And going through that, I mean, that was hard as well, because you'd be like, oh shit, why did I use that same word twice in that paragraph? That's something I try not to do, and I thought we had caught that. And then I did find the one typo in the book while I was reading it, and it was in the last name of a good friend of ours in the acknowledgments section. And the publishers are like, actually, like, it's good luck that there's that's kind of a publishing industry thing. I don't know if they were making me feel better or not, but I mean, and it did. Ultimately, they're like, no, it's good luck. If you found the one typo, that's okay. And then I had to profusely apologize to my friend. I was like, so, my publisher says that it's good luck when there's a typo in the book. And, well, your name is actually the typo. And she was awesome.
And then she comes back with, oh, they also say it's good luck when a bird poops on you. So, or when it rains on your wedding day.
Exactly.
I don't care what Atlantis Morissette says. It's not ironic.
That is not ironic.
It's not ironic. So what's some advice you would give to an aspiring author? Someone comes up to you and says, Rob, you wrote this book. It's great. I want to do the same thing. What would you tell an aspiring author?
Just start. I think I've had people come up to me indicating they'd like to write or wish they could. And it's like, just start. Don't get hung up on what you think the finished product is going to look like. It's the analogy I use is it's like if you're, that scene in Ghost where they're doing the pottery and everything, like you got to just get the clay down and start to mold it and shape it. And writing is like that. It's like, you've just got to get the words on a page, then step back, look at what you've got, and then, reshape it and keep going and refining it over and over and over again. And don't, so there's 2. One is just start. The other one is don't rush divine timing. Books take a long time. It's not writing a tweet. You are writing a lot more characters. And so don't put artificial deadlines on yourself. You've got to get into the headspace, the physical space in some cases. And it's not easy. It's not like you go from writing a report, flipping into writing a chapter in your book. Like, you've got to have that moment of time and space to do it. So don't put pressure on yourself. Just enjoy the process and do it.
Let's say you can go back in time to give your younger self some advice. What would you give? How would you, let's say you could write a letter to your younger self, write a letter to me exercise and mail it to the younger Rob. What would you tell your younger self?
Oh, well, I've done this in therapy as well. Hugging my inner child. It's okay. It's going to be better. But yeah, that's really what it's about, is going back to, Rob in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade and saying, like, the things, this really hurts right now. But the things that you're going through are going to enable you to do great things as you get older and help people. And so, as painful as it is, it's making me who I am. And that's a really great gift, ultimately. Like, I don't regret what I went through. I don't know that I would even change it necessarily, because if I changed it, I wouldn't be me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be who I am today.
I mean, to that end, if you had the ear of any of those kids who teased you on that fall day in 1980, what would you tell them?
Of those kids at that time?
At that time, yeah. So, I mean, knowing what you know now, I mean, kind of,
Yeah.
knowing what you know now.
Slap them upside the head and say, knock it off. I would say, well, and it's interesting, and I write about it. I mean, that is the sort of larger arc in the book of my journey and how I came to a place of forgiveness with those kids. And so, knowing what I know now, I think I would go back to them and talk to them about the things that are hurting them and their own suffering, and what's happening for them at home or in other places, and trying to help them get to a better place of coping and dealing with that, rather than taking it out on other people.
Well, it's a beautiful sentiment, and kind of brings us right back to where we began.
Yes, it does. Full circle moment.
A full circle. So the book, of course, is Tell Me More About That. It can be purchased wherever books are sold. Rob, anything else you want to say to the listeners of Uncorking a Story?
Well, first, thank you so much for listening. And I do hope they check out the book. You can also visit 5stepstoempathy.com. It's the number 5 stepstoempathy.com to learn more about the book and me and all the things. And then hopefully people will find me on social media and follow me. You can look for either Empathy Activist or RM Volpe or Rob Volpe, and I'm on almost every platform.
Well, there you go. Rob, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to chat with me. I appreciate it.
Awesome, Mike. Thank you. This has been awesome.